When you're practicing for the delivery of your speech, your voice and your eye contact are really only part of the package, right? That only is really your head. So we have to talk about the rest of your body. And we call this physical manipulation. So when we talk about physical manipulation, one of the things that we talk about is posture, right? This is the use of our body to emphasize different meanings. So posture is obviously going to be a part of that, and our posture is actually really important. When you stand up to give your speech and you come up and you stand with a straight back and your shoulders pushed back and you just stand really tall, that sends a message to the audience that you are confident in the content that you are about to deliver. Whereas if you come up and you're kind of slouched forward, your shoulders are rolled in, and you're just kind of slouching, that sends a message to the audience that maybe you aren't as respectable or credible of a source as you could be. So our posture actually says a lot about us. So you want to be aware of the thing that your body is doing. You want to be aware of whether you're standing tall or if you are rolling your shoulders forward and having your arms crossed or crossing your legs, right? All of these things are things that I see all the time when it comes to posture, and having these sort of more relaxed postures or closed postures, closed body language, just sends a really negative message to the audience. So be aware of what your body is doing. You also want to make sure that you are moving during your speech, that you aren't just standing still in one place. And part of this is planning out your movements, right? You don't want to be pacing back and forth in front of the audience aimlessly. You want your movements to be purposeful. So one thing that I tell my students to try using is the speaker's triangle. And so with the speaker's triangle, you start in the center of the room and you give your introduction. And then for the first main point, you move to the left side of the room during your transition. And then during your transition from your first point to your second point, you move to the right side of the room. Then during the transition from your second point to your third point, you move back to the center of the room. And when you go to conclude, you take one small step forward. So you're kind of moving all over the room, but at very specific points in the speech so that it's purposeful, right? So that you aren't just pacing aimlessly. And doing the speaker's triangle can be really effective in helping your audience to pay attention to you, right? Because if you're moving at certain points in your speech, it makes them look up again. It makes them re-engage with the speech. And if you want an example of the speaker's triangle, go ahead and take a look at the data analysis video that we watched in the informative speech section. That's a really good example of it was in the organization speech. It was the one that started off with the story about Target. That's a really good example of a speaker's triangle. It stops you from standing in just one place and being kind of frozen in place. Body movement also includes gestures. So you, again, want to make sure that your gestures are natural, but that they aren't distracting to the point where it looks like you're conducting a choir, right? You want your gestures to emphasize specific places in your speech, and whenever you aren't using your hands to gesture something, they should either be at your sides or resting gently in front of you. So be aware of what your gestures are saying as well, because they send messages. They help you to emphasize specific points in the speech. But if used too frequently, they can again become distracting. So we have to find that middle ground. We have to find the middle ground between moving too little and looking like a robot and moving too much and our movements distracting our audience from the message that we're sending. We also want to be aware of what our faces are doing. And one of the best ways to do this is to practice in front of a mirror. So if you are passionate about something, the facial expressions will kind of come naturally. And we can express so much through our faces, but we want to make sure that we're expressing the right thing. For example, if we're talking about genocide or depression or something along those lines that's not a terribly happy subject, we want to make sure that we aren't smiling creepily while we are talking about that. So be aware of what your face is doing and practice your speech in front of a mirror to help you see what your face is doing while you're giving a speech. believe it or not, your dress also has a lot to say about you, and it sends a message to the audience. Now, again, I'm never going to tell you that you have to dress up for your speeches, because I know that you're students and that you have lives outside of this class and that you don't want to be walking around all day in dress shoes or heels or slacks or whatever it is. However, dressing up a little bit using the step above rule can help you to feel more confident in your speech. So the step above rule is when your audience, for example, comes to class wearing like ratty jeans and t-shirts and kind of really casual clothing, you wear your nice jeans and a blouse or a polo shirt or a button down, something like that where it's just a step above what your audience is wearing so that you feel like you are the best dressed in the classroom, right? And that can help you feel confidence because if nothing else, hey, at least you look good, right? So be aware of the message that your clothing is sending and be aware of whether the way that you're dressed is going to impact your credibility in a negative way. So overall, right, we just have to be aware of the self-presentation that we are making. And when you are presenting your speech, you are also presenting yourself. So the way that you look, the way that you stand, how you walk during your speech, the movements that you have, how you use your voice, how you use the lectern, how you use your gestures, all of these things send a message. And they can either enhance the message that you are trying to send, or they can distract from it. So we definitely want to always avoid distracting our audience with our self-presentation and instead have our posture and our body movements, our gestures, our facial expressions, all of these things enhance our overall message.